what seems to be a major shake-up in the requirement for admission into tertiary institutions, the Nigerian senior secondary school students in arts and humanities will no longer be required to present a credit in mathematics in their senior school certificate examination organized by the West African Examination Council and National Examination Council as a condition for admission to universities and polytechnics, and the Federal Ministry of Education has said that on Tuesday. The Minister of Education, Dr. Tunde Alausa, described the reform as a deliberate effort to expand access to tertiary education. The ministry also approved a comprehensive reform of admission entry requirements into all tertiary institutions across the country, increasing the average annual intake from about 700 to about 1 million students. The revised guideline will now specify that a minimum of 5 credits in relevant subjects, including English language, remain mandatory for university admissions. However, mathematics will now be required only for science and technology and social science courses. So joining us to discuss this on the morning show is Professor Anthony Kila, Director of Commonwealth Institute of Advanced Professional Studies, CIAPS. Professor Kila, I am not a great fan of maths, but is this move not just to make our students technically very lazy and docile because we want to populate university at the expense of quality again?
Well, I think it's a very bad move. You know, there's no, I think it's a terrible move. There's no other way to put it. I understand this minister is a medical doctor, is a physician. So because I wasted 3 years of my parents' money in medical school before I returned to my true passion, which is classic studies and then economics and then law, and I have a failed marriage with a medical doctor, I think it's important to know that when I come to doctors, I come with deference because they do what I was not able to do. So I come with total respect. But from this place of deference, I come also with a very deliberated and clear mind to say to the minister, Honorable Minister, you're wrong, and you need to...
Why do you think it's wrong?
It's wrong because the idea of saying because math is difficult for students and we think they don't need it is wrong. If you think it's difficult, you should improve the way in which it is taught and learned, which is what most people say. The idea of saying that if you're going to do arts, you don't need to count or multiply or subtract, is a subtraction from our national sense, which should not be allowed to stand. Is a vulnus, is a Latin word, a blow to our intellectual fiber. Mathematics is not just about problem solving. A lot of people make that error. It's not just about problem solving. It's not just finding the X. It's not just finding the solution to a problem. It's a discipline that shapes rigor, that allows you to know how to reason in a way that even as an artist, your poetry does not become noise. As a musician, you can find the rhythm. From the religion in which we do our Hail Mary, or the number of Astagfirullah that we say, or the rhythm on the couples of Ifa, these are numbers. Poetry without number does not make sense. When you go from the meter to the parameter in the meter to the construction of Oriki, these are numbers. You see, the essence of a trained mind is actually numbers. Let me shock the ministers and those who think it's doing them a favor. 2 things. Number 1, contrary to what people think, and Instagram is there to prove it because of the way animals are behaving now, one of the few things that actually differentiates us between animals is numbers. Animals love, they reproduce, they sleep, they die, they feel pain, they steal, they feel sorry. We can say all those things. But one thing they don't do is calculation. The whole definition of Homo sapiens that actually separates us is numbers. That's the social being. So when you deprive a whole part of a generation from the most universal language, which is the language of numbers, to master it, there's something wrong in that. It doesn't make sense at all. Right. And we need to relook at it.
Well, I think some animals, some gorillas, can, close to our DNA, can do some basic calculations.
Yeah, there'll be some.
Yeah.
There'll be some. Most of us should be able to, and do it very well. Not just do 2 + 3.
Okay, so Professor Kila, I was a science student. I loved maths a lot, and it was one of my favorite subjects. So I would want everyone to study maths. However, what they're saying is that you don't need maths to go to university.
Yeah.
So at basic education level, maths has not been removed from the curriculum. And so you would have the knowledge you're talking about. If we have quality basic education, by the time you reach the level of going to university, you ought to be able to do maths. You are taught geometry, you're taught even Pythagoras theorem, you're taught quadratic equation in secondary school. So you should have the knowledge of that. Right, so I agree with you in terms of quality of education, but as a requirement to study an art subject, in the US, it's not a required subject for traditional art subjects. In the UK, it's not a required subject. I think it's rethinking the way that the world is going towards. There are certain subjects that you study that you don't need maths. You have the basic knowledge. Everyone should be able to count. Some people don't even need to go to education. If you go to the market woman, they can count in naira and kobo as a result of what they do. So you have basic maths. What they are saying is that it should not be put as a criteria to go into university. So they are not taking away maths from the curriculum. They're just saying that as a requirement for certain art subject, not the social sciences, we shouldn't have it as a requirement. What do you have to say about that? Because I think it's important to not go to the narrative that people will not know how to count anymore. They will know how to count if the basic education is well done. Then you should know how to count.
Well, I understand very fully that they do not intend to take away from schools the way they took away history, which they now brought back. My argument, my position is that the kind of people that we should allow to go to university should have a certified knowledge of maths up to all ordinary levels, the O level. That's the point. I want to look at the university and tell myself everybody inside that place has a minimum of a credit of mathematics inside there. Question is why? Because I believe that whether they're coming to do poetry, arts, or humanities, or anything they're coming to do, I believe that they have gone through and have proof of knowledge of a rigorous way of thinking. Not even solving the problem. It's not about knowing how to calculate the kilometer you make a road, or to do the percentage, or interest, or inflation, or what is nominal inflation anymore. It's not even about that. That is an extra, it helps, because at some point in life, if you live in Lagos, you should be able to understand very well that if I go to Abuja for 20 days, should I rent a house or stay in a hotel? You should be able to do those kind of calculations.
I can do that. So I studied international relations.
That's what I mean.
I've not used Pythagoras theorem since I started working.
But that's because you had a bad teacher.
I can solve equations.
You can solve it.
No,
but
I know
that's
it.
my point.
But I'm
not
saying that
you
I have
don't.
not used it.
But that's
so
what I'm saying.
That's of it is what I'm asking.
That's the point I'm saying.
I can solve a quadratic equation. I can solve a Pythagoras theorem.
I'm not saying you cannot.
But I have not used it.
You see, here's the problem.
Why should we continue? Because of if I've not used it, it's not relevant to the course. Why must we insist? So I'm saying that it's important to be taught, but to make it a requirement for courses, there are other ways you can think rigorously, because an artist who views a structure is thinking, right? A bus conductor who has not seen, some of them haven't seen the four walls of a school, can give you your change accurately. If you are short by 5 naira, they will tell you. So I'm saying that I get you, but I feel that the world is moving ahead. The US and the UK does not have maths as a requirement for art subject. I didn't need that when I got into university for international relations, but I knew maths. I was the best science student graduating. So it was not I know how to solve equations, but it's not required in my course.
I think you reason like the minister when you limit maths to application. The fact that you don't use it, the fact that you can do Pythagoras theorem and you do not use it every day, does not mean it is useless or it is not needed. I argue, I do not say every human being has to have a credit in mathematics. My point is that those who go to university should have a credit in mathematics. In the same way, I argue that anybody that wants to do politics in Nigeria should have read the Constitution. People can say, I don't use the Constitution. It's very possible. People can say, I do not use some of the things I've learned. But you see, my view about mathematics is that it is not about mere application. It is part of the formation. And the proof of having that formation is the credit you have. It is not enough to say, I went to school for 5 years, from year 1 to the final year of exam. I need the proof that actually you went through it and you're certified to know it. If we actually believe, if we want to go, and I've thought about it, for people who see things from your point of view, to say that, well, if you're going to do arts or poetry or other kind of humanities, maybe you don't need it. I have a solution. Let us do a curriculum called Maths for Humanities. Let us use the kind of arts that they will understand, logic and reasoning. social sciences, math for social sciences, statistics for literature. These are the kind of things, because you see, in reality, contrary to what people think. And you see, when people say, I don't use this, I don't use that, let me warn people that essayists who write essays, they count their arguments. They measure the impact of their reasoning. Poets, dramatists, when they write the drama, they measure the impact, the weight, they measure the group characters.
Okay, so just avoidance of doubt. I'm not saying don't do maths.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is at basic level, if we have quality basic education, it is sufficient for you to live life without having to get to advanced maths where you need it as a criteria to a C to get into university. So maths is good. Everyone should have quantitative reasoning, qualitative reasoning. But in terms of the argument is that, so that I'm not misconstrued, maths is good, but at that level, whereby you need to have it as a C to enter university, I don't think, I mean...
So math is good, but it's good for some people, you argue.
Everybody at basic level.
Let me try and bridge this conversation before you respond. You know, you mentioned O-level, for example.
Yes.
And there are several countries where your math is compulsory until O-level. You know, maths, English, a number of subjects, but maths and English are always at the top of that list. Okay. And then we move on to A-level, which is the realm that we're saying we want to start specializing to prepare for university, at which point you can drop anything you wish to drop because you're preparing for the specialization. Now, do you think that our challenge may be intrinsically in how we've structured our education system here in Nigeria? That what we're calling the junior secondary school and the senior secondary school may not be structured in such a way that allows us to take education of basic subjects to a satisfactory level and then leave them behind to now focus on specialization. Do you think maybe that's where the conversation should be?
I think it's partly that. I agree with you that we have a structural problem in the way we structured basic and, if you want, advanced level of pre-university education. That problem is something that needs to be looked into. And the way we have it, it really doesn't allow for it to happen. There is a correlation that people fail to see when we talk about the the decline in our value of education. For some of us who have taken time to study it, you can really trace it back to when we did this reform that got us to where we are. If you look back into history and the people of yesteryears, the people who did the proper A levels, HSC of those days, you can see their quality wherever they are. To this generation who has not done it, good luck to everybody. We don't have to make things worse than they are. When we say, as you rightly pointed out, that in some countries you don't need these qualifications to get in, and part of what we miss is what you point out, that in those countries is actually because it is A levels they're testing, not O levels. And by the way, where they're not testing it, I argue that we should make graduates that stand out for their ability to know maths than others, not to know as less than others. And when we look at the world, and I struggle to say this without appearing immodest, but the fact is that whilst many people are looking at the rest of the world, some of us, the rest of the world, listen to what we say.
Okay. So I also like to put this argument forward that in a very analytical and maths-driven world, why are we running away from maths? We are here because of maths. The AI we press on our phones, mathematics. The coding, mathematics. The programming language at which we are getting this out there, mathematics. The component, mathematics. And in fact, there's never been a time that maths is so important than today, where we now talk about LLM, large language models. Is this the best time to run away from math?
Well, absolutely no. I think this is a retreat, not a reform. Let me put it that way. Because what we should be doing. So, in my mind, when I have Minister of Education, in a very plain way, in my mind, what the minister should be doing should be getting more chairs into school, more computers for those who need it, repair windows that are not working. Not this kind of policies. If we're going to do policies, I think the day we're going to touch maths, I believe that what we should be doing is to make sure that we improve the way maths is learned and taught. I'm very happy for people who were good at maths in school and enjoyed it or just went through it. But I also imagine, those who have read Dante, the Divine Comedy, I imagine that if you think of a literature of a place in heaven and hell, there'll be a special place for a lot of maths teachers, because a lot of people's life has been ruined because they had bad, frustrating, incompetent maths teacher. We need to go back to make people understand that mathematics started as fun, that maths is something you use to enjoy. There's a whole generation that cannot see the link between subtraction and seduction, that cannot see the link between being able to define, even in plain English, the difference between possibility and probabilities. These links are there in mathematics that we need to see. And it is important that we understand this thing very well, that most of the things we do today, as you mentioned, actually, let's put it this way, never in the history of humanity has mathematics been so present, albeit invisible.
Yes.
Because everything we do, I mean, even the word count. So my students of literature, even when you submit your essay, even the word count, that is math. Yes, the computer does it for you, but it's still math. You know, everything we do, the high five is math. Do people know the significance, the origin of high five, the mathematics involved, on why 5 + 5 makes 10, and it becomes a high five? There's a lot. I believe that if the minister wants to do us a favor, what we should be doing is finding a way to make maths become our everyday life.
So Professor
to
Kila,
use those parts that we're not using.
I'm getting messages here that are saying, I don't agree with you. A law student does not need maths.
They're wrong.
What do we need maths for? You know, these are some of the comments that come in. What do you say to people like that?
What I'm going to say to them is that they should watch this space. And now I'm going to do an advert. This is a placard that says, let our children count. In the next days, there's going to be a series of campaigns, which some of us are leading, that will prove to all those people why law students, Yoruba students, philosophy students, why they need maths, why it is good for them. They can live without it, but it's going to make them a better person. What? And that's the whole point. That will make them a better person. So the minister of policy that takes away what will make us a better person is not doing us any good.
All right, let me come in here. So again, let me just reiterate that perhaps the conversation should be around the quality of basic education. Basic education in Nigeria is up until your junior secondary school examination. And maths has not been taken away from that as a requirement to get to SS senior secondary. So it means that if education reform is done in such a way that maths is well taught at basic education, when you're in GSS3, you would need to pass maths to go to the senior level when you then diversify or go into a specific area. So you have that knowledge of maths. The coding we're talking about, AI, there are children in primary school who know how to code. So the world is moving to a place where science and maths is introduced at a very young age. Thereby, by the age where you are in GSS3, you know what you want to do. And also, the world is also evolving to the kind of work that young people are going into. Last 2 weeks, we had Madu, who is a ballet dancer and now has become known around the world. If you ask Madu, I don't think he would need maths to enter university. Do you not think that we lose some stars who would have been further trained by this requirement to have maths to go into university? Because we're looking at it in the Nigerian traditional sense. The world is evolving. People are now wanting to be musicians, studying music production, and they have a basic knowledge of maths to the extent that they would need it to go to senior secondary school. The argument or the policy affects university entry, not that maths is eradicated, not that the children will not be able to count, because if at GSS3 a child cannot count, then we have a real problem on our hands. So should the conversation not be around, let the children count at age, well, maybe 13 in GSS3 for an average student. If you cannot count at 13, we have a problem on our hands. If you cannot code at 13, because the minister also put a policy that AI will be introduced at primary level. So what I see is a moving towards the global trend of education. Do you not see that way? And more of a movement to ensure that basic education is quality enough that at GSS3, a child can count, a child can code, a child can make a decision as to which line or path they want to toe.
Well, I think the conversation is about admission to tertiary institution, and that is what I focus on. I want as much as possible to be done from primary school to basic secondary school. But my argument is that our framing of who goes to university should be that those who we allow to go to university should be a set of people that have a documented evidence of their ability to do rigorous reasoning, to be able to critically assess things, and to be able to come out with balanced view. When we talk about the global trend, the global trend in the world, and let's be careful about this global trend. The global trend in the world is the world of a relative world where people can copy and paste. And they say things that they don't understand. If you go on Twitter, there are times I read things on Twitter, some posts, and I wonder if it is possible to know how to write without knowing how to read. Because this idea of anybody can express themselves, this idea of once you are young and you can juggle a ball and they put a camera in front of you, and you get 1 million views or even 100,000 views, you're a star. You don't need to learn anything anymore. You start to you specialize very early. It makes an incomplete human being. That is why today we have people who do not even understand the basic thing of when you meet somebody older than you or superior than you, you don't say, how are you to that person. The elder person says, how are you to you. You don't say that. We've lost those kind of things. So the global trend doesn't allow for that. And again, I argue, we should understand the global trend, but where possible, we should lead it. And one of the best ways to lead it is too many people fight over oil and gas. My interest is in our human capital development in Nigeria. And one of the things that we should do is that we should produce graduates and undergraduates that have the X factor. And one of those X factors we can give them is maths. The others are maybe languages. But definitely, we should see maths and X factor, not a way to say it is not needed, not a way to say you can do about it. People say you can do without maths. I want them to show me anybody that knowledge of maths has been bad for. Whether they're a lawyer, a painter, an artist, or a poet.
Now, the debate here is, or rather the premise was to improve access to university. That's the minister's argument. Yes. Now, some people would argue and say that, well, is it necessary to make such a move? You look at some countries, I mean, I can go very close to home. You look at a country like Zimbabwe, for example. Zimbabwe is notoriously difficult to get into university because the standard is so high. So most Zimbabwean students end up going to universities in the region because it's very difficult. You need a very high grades to get into a Zimbabwean university. That's a public university. Now the question is, where should the focus be? Should we be more worried about getting more Nigerians into tertiary institutions, or should we be worried about making sure the standard of tertiary institution is so high that it's almost impossible, that we just have the bare minimum in there, but they're the best of the best, and then we now have a large population that's struggling to get into university? What's the priority?
I think we shouldn't do one instead of one. We should try to do the two. Just since you mentioned Zimbabwe, I want to say something. I have taught in Zimbabwe University, and it's a delight to be inside Zimbabwe University to teach students where they do not have the glamour of most of the Nigerian universities. Most people don't know them. But when you interact with them, you can see that thing that you call difficult to enter. You can see the result. You can feel it in the way they do. So my argument is that we should do our best to improve our basic education, but insist that people get enough maths training and a documented one to get to university.
Must everybody go to university? Must university be a mass parakpo that every Tom, Dick, and Harry is packed in, and we drop the standards because they can't pass maths?
I argue not.
Because you see, what I'm seeing here is just a minister, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that wants to increase university quota, so that they will be able to say, in their time, we increase university quota. So must everybody go through university? Is this overemphasis on university not even destroying the potentials of people, like you say about, because we've built a society where people say if you don't go to university, you are nothing. So must everybody go to university?
I think not. I do not agree that everybody should go to university, but it's something I cannot shout, because every day I make sure my own children go. And, you know, and people who say, not everybody should go to university, people look at them and say, what are your plans for your own children? What I believe is that I go to what Obafemi Awolowo did, you know, one of our best policymaker in terms of education. When his group, you know, led by people like Ile-Somi and others, when they were planning the education, they thought through. The principle was education must be free, but because the sine qua non for the life of people. But they also thought that we must create different pathways for this education. Vocational school is one side, Technical training is one side, trade is another. So there needs to be a holistic view. Whilst we want to ensure that all our best should get the best kind of education, we must also ensure that not everybody is trained to have that kind of mind for university. Now, not having a mind for university does not mean you should have a life not worthy of living. That is where the holistic view comes in, which means that if you're a handy person, either technically handy or arts-wise handy, you can have a good life still in your world. But this, you see, what we should be careful of is this, and I hope I'm not going to irritate anybody. What we should be careful of is that people making a badge of what they cannot have. Because you're not married doesn't mean you should glorify being a single parent. That's the whole point. We should understand that the ideal is this way. What we aspire for is this. So just because we cannot get it, we should not make it okay. We should not dumb down. The duty of the society, of the minister of parents, is to uplift all, not to come down to their level.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insights and all of what you have said. You're carrying the